Trine and Loise. Welcome to the Dad Edge, even though you're not dads, but it's great to have you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And you're not even from the States. I love hearing this accent, but of course, if you're from Denmark, you're like, no, you people from the US have an accent, not us. But Loise, I would just love for you to just share where you're from and your background as we get started here.
Yeah, I'm living just outside Copenhagen, in Denmark, and I'm a proud mother of 4 girls, at the age of 18 and 29, and I'm a grandma as well.
No way, 4 girls.
4 girls.
Let me ask you this: when the girls, when you were raising them, they're still in the house, and people who didn't know you said, "Oh, tell me about your family," and you said, "I have 4 girls." What was the response?
Well, they were blown away and
Yeah.
asking me, "Don't you want a boy?"
Right. Right. Yeah, I bet. But what I do now, I don't know if you can appreciate this or not, but like what I do now, because I always know the same response is coming every time I say I have 4 boys, which is so when they're like, "You have kids?" I'm like, "Yeah," and they're like, "How many?" And I say, right when I say 4, they go, "Wow," and I just say "wow" with them, and then they're like, "Boys or girls?" I'm like, "All boys," and then they're like, "Wow," and then they get more powerful wow, and I usually just say it right with them. I had one guy, I'll never forget, it was like about 12 years ago. He didn't say wow. He's like, "Well, why?" And I'm like, "Why?" I was like, "I've never heard that one before, but I don't know. It's just the way it
No,
happened."
I'm asked if there is a lot of drama with all the girls.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. For us, it's the way I'm sure there's a lot of drama. I would love for you. This is the way I've always described it to people who don't have 4
Mm.
boys. I don't know how you kind of give it to, because people ask me like, "What's that like?" I'm just like, just imagine that you're at a fraternity party where everybody's drunk and nobody wants to sleep and everybody's eating everything and no one ever leaves and no one ever sleeps and it never stops. That is my home.
Yeah.
So, but I
Well,
don't know
my
about 4
whole
girls.
4 girls is just like there is a lot of heartbreaks. There's a lot of ice cream eating in front of sad movies. There's a lot of discussions, and a lot of energy.
I bet I can. So you have a lot of ice cream in the house, or did you?
Well, I
Because
did. I
okay,
did. Always ice cream.
outstanding. We love you already. We want to come visit now.
Yeah. Well, you're welcome.
So Trina, how about you?
Well, I was born and raised in Denmark. I also have all girls. I have 3 girls,
God
and
bless you.
remarried. Now live in the US. I've been in Florida for now 20 years, and it's hot. And there's also
Yes.
a lot of chatter in my house. It's constant chatting and drama, heartbreaks, get upset about almost anything. So
Okay.
I have to stay calm a lot.
I bet. And Trina, how old's your oldest?
I have a 13, 11-year-old and a 3-year-old.
Okay, perfect. So I have a question for both of you. And so, Loise, I want you to think back 30 years ago. And Trina, I want you to think back 14 years ago. I want to put you in this scenario where you can literally pick up your phone and you call yourself, for you, Trina, 14 years ago, for you, Loise, 30 years ago. And you're like, "Hey, I just want to let you know that you're going to have all girls, 3 girls, 4 girls. And I want to give you some advice just that's going to save you a lot of frustration. That's going to help you maybe even raise strong, confident, resilient young girls. And here's the advice for you." What would you tell yourself?
Hang in there was the first thing.
Yeah.
The next
Yeah.
thing is that you're doing okay. You're good enough. And believe in yourself. And begin your personal journey and development even quicker.
Okay. Trina, how about you?
Definitely have kindness and patience with yourself. Make sure that you don't take their behaviors personally. It's not about you when they get angry with you. They are trying to organize their emotions. And if you can just be in there, not take it personally, be kind with yourself and patient with yourself, there's going to be a lot we're going to be able to listen better to our children and be present for them in a way that they really need that stability. And that's something that I really had to learn on my journey. Yeah.
You know, what's fascinating about both your answers is it's an inward answer. It's more about the self than what, you know, life lessons am I going to teach, or what things am I going to do, or what tactics am I going to use with my kid, with my girls when I'm raising them. It's all about being inward, which is really fascinating. A lot of guests that I have on, you know, and I've had guests on that talk about this topic of how do you raise a resilient, strong, confident young woman, right? And in your case, or kids just in general. And a lot of it has to do with like, well, there's the external things that I'm going to be teaching them. You know, it's not very often that we talk about this internal, which is actually right on par with what you guys do, which is more of what you guys call this time in, right? And we started jamming though before we hit record today. And one of the things that really emerged is men in general, right? We tend to go inward a lot when it comes to how we feel that we're performing as a father or as a husband. And we're pretty darn critical, I think, of ourselves. So we're critical inward, but then outward, we don't know exactly what good looks like sometimes. Or even if we do know what good looks like, we don't know exactly how to get there. And I think we tend to lose grace and patience with ourselves, which I think can be good and bad, right? It keeps us very aware of like, hey, there's something missing here, but I don't know what it is. But it's also can be quite unfulfilling at times because we're so critical. But I'm just curious from both of your experiences, because you've been doing this for a long time. Why do men do that?
Well, I think that we all get very self-critical, and we're raised in a society, we're raised with parents that are not very self-aware. They don't know emotional intelligence. They don't know what thoughts and emotions really impact how we do certain things. So we're raised with this lack of awareness really of why we're saying these things to ourselves. A lot of times very automatic what it is that how we beat ourselves up as humans. So I think that men wants to do well. They want to do their job. They want to provide for the family. They want to protect the family. But a lot of times we're not very good at giving ourselves feedback. We're not very good at checking in with ourselves and actually recognizing growth, recognizing what we do well. And sometimes it's just the little things that we need to recognize that we do that well. And then we feel successful.
So well said. Loise, how about you?
Well, I think that our parents, as Trine said, that wasn't very aware, and you can't teach your kids something that you can't master yourself. So we have a whole generation that needs to learn the awareness and those steps because our parents couldn't do it. They didn't know how to. So these time-ins and check-ins have helped me a lot in my journey and with my male clients.
Man, a big theme that's really emerging for me on this side is men who desperately want to be the pattern breakers, right? Because you're right.
Mm.
I think our generation of moms and dads, you know, that they probably did the best job they could, right, with what they had. I mean, they were probably doing and saying things and executing the way they were raised, right? And I think every generation probably wants to be better than the previous one, right? But sometimes we don't know exactly what good looks like. I compare it to this a lot, which is for men, you know, it's like if we don't know what good looks like, it's a lot like going to Home Depot and buying that brand new charbroil barbecue pit, and you open up the manual and it says, hey, here's 100 ways not to put this together. Best of luck. You know, but it doesn't tell you like, okay, great, that's awesome, but how do I put this thing together? And then, of course, if you try to put together a barbecue pit like that, there would be frustration. You're trying to figure out, you're like, I think this goes here. I'm not really sure. This kind of sucks. And, you know, it just makes that journey really, really tough. But if we do want to learn, and I think every man listening to this podcast, they're eager to learn, but we're in a society right now, in a generation right now, where it is like information overload. And I think one of the most beautiful gifts we can give anybody who wants to learn anything these days is simplicity. So is there simplicity in some of the ways that we can learn these things.
Absolutely. I think the reason why we came together, Louisa and I, to create these time-ins is really to make it as simple as possible, because we need to be able to have a space where we can marinate in the right vocabulary and the right inputs in terms of what this looks like. If we don't have any tangible way of going about parenting, or how we talk to our children, or how we talk to our spouse, how are we going to do anything different? You know, this is a language that we're not taught in schools. This is a language that we were not told about from our parents how to do. So in our weekly Time In Tuesdays, we want to make sure that we marinate people in this language of what does it sound like? How do we speak about this? How do we take a time in for ourselves on a daily basis? How do we not take things personally? What is it that goes on in our head that that gets us kind of lost, that we sabotage, right? And we end up being angry, we end up being frustrated, and we letting it out on our family, and then we feel guilty because that's not what we wanted to do, right? We want to show up and be the best that we can be. So this tune in to ourselves is so important, that we just take that 2 minutes to just check in with ourselves and see what's going on right now. Where am I at right now? Mm-hmm. And what is my next intention in how I want to show up as the person I want to be?
So well said. And I think let's just step back for a second, because everybody's familiar with a timeout. You're there, go in timeout. Had enough of you, timeout. But you know, I've had so many guests on this podcast at this point, and I've never heard the term time in or tune in. Well, I've tune in, yeah, but let's really talk and dissect of what a time in / tune in even really looks like. What does good look like when it comes to that?
Well, I'm so glad that you brought that up, because time in actually came from timeouts. You know that we send our children out of the group. We remove the problem from the group, and they go reflect on themselves, and sometimes feel bad about themselves. They feel isolated. They may feel rejected from the group, and that's really not how you want to use timeouts. Timeout is really, go straighten yourself out and then come back when you do better, right? Mm-hmm. But how is a child, or any adult for that sake, able to organize how they feel in that moment and transition that into something positive when they don't have the tools to do so? 100%. So instead of having it be a time out as linked with punishment or isolating yourself, or you're the one that needs to be removed from the group, instead, we want you to choose you. I am sensing I'm not my best self right now. I'm going to choose a time in for myself. I'm going to go in and check in with myself and get myself aligned again with my values and my intentions and where I want to be. And then with my best self, go back out again and now connect with my family, my wife, or my kids. And you will have much better success in how you're going to proceed.
And it's just like if you're on an airplane and those masks fall down, the crew tell you to put your mask on first. And this is what the time in is. You put your mask on first so you can be a better person to everybody else.
Is there a structure to follow with that?
Or you think about put your mask on first?
Yeah, no. So like for this time in, I know before we hit the record button, I shared with you guys how I sort of stumbled upon my own transition during the days and a time in before I exit work and then go to the family. But to be quite honest, I don't have a structure to it other than I set my timer for 5 minutes. I put on some music, and I try to depart from my work mentality. So like more like that hunter-gatherer mentality, or maybe it was a great day, maybe it was a challenging day, but whatever it was, I'm going to leave it behind and not be, hunter-gatherer provider. I'm going to be dad, right? Which is leader, emotional support, right? Physical affection, all these things, love, caring, all these things. So to make that transition, I don't have a structure to it other than I set the timer, I put on some music, and I just start writing what I think that could look like. And but I don't know if there's a structure maybe that we could follow.
Well, there certainly is a structure that you can follow. You can create your own structure in terms of what you want to spend those few minutes. You could be writing or listening to music, but you can also really turn inward and kind of do a brief visualization. And if you're up for it, we can do a quick 2-minute now,
Let's
and
do
we can
it.
demonstrate how we can do a quick tune-in.
Can we do this? Let's take, I think I read a statistic here recently that 82% of men work at a job that they either don't like, to some degree, or absolutely despise. It's like 8 out of 10 men that they spend 40, 50, 60, 70 hours, 80 hours a week, some of them doing a job that they absolutely despise. And then they have to make that transition. So let's just keep that in mind as we talk to the men, and maybe transition of like, man, I feel a little beat up, right? Not only from external things, maybe on the job or stress or whatever else, but we talked about that inner critic that likes to beat us up, right? So we're dealing with that maybe type of baggage that we hear these things that nobody else hears, but we're saying them to ourselves internally. And now we have to be like, okay, now I need to tune in and do something about it. So yeah, let's take that in consideration. I'm happy to be your guinea pig.
Okay, great. Well, just allow yourself to get into a comfortable position. If you're comfortable with it, you can close your eyes and just take a deep cleansing breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. And in this moment, I just invite you to tune into yourself and notice what's happening inside of your body and in your mind. You may have different sensations in your body. You may be aware of your thoughts, that you feel beat up or not really striving, maybe failing in some areas of your life. So just notice those negative thoughts, maybe negative emotions, or anything that comes up in your mind and in your body. And it's important that we don't judge it. It's really just more of an observance, observing of your thoughts and observing of your emotions and your sensations. And now at this moment, just imagine that above your head is a beautiful bright light. And this bright light is coming down through the top of your head and just flushing, rinsing your body from top to toe. Just like a vacuum cleaner, sucking everything out, that all the negativity that you're telling yourself and then maybe stuck in your body. Now your body is just fully filled up with this beautiful bright light. And now I want you to bring in the intention that you want to have for today. Maybe you want to be the best version of yourself, what that looks like. Maybe bring in a certain feeling or a certain thought that can really help you today. What are you good at? And just let that be your intention for when you get out of this tune in. When you're ready, you can open up your eyes. And then we're back.
That was pretty awesome. I'm not going to lie. So I'll share with you just some really quick reflections. Number one, thank you for that. That was awesome. So I'm not really like a woo-woo person. right? I think the audience probably knows me well enough that I'm more like a logical, science-based kind of guy, but I'm also a little bit of woo-woo, maybe like 60-40-ish. So from the scientific, logical perspective of what's going on, those deep breaths, you know, I felt immediately that activation of the parasympathetic nervous system, right? That rest and digest. I didn't even realize how shallow I was breathing during this interview until I step back and calm down. Right. And immediately I didn't even realize how much tension I had in my shoulders just having this conversation, even though I've loved the conversation, but it's like we're on, right? And immediately when I stepped into that, I felt everything just sort of relax. And then the visualization of like the negativity being taken out, right? And that light, right, that was there. And you know, what we focus on grows and what we focus on expands. And as soon as I started to just shed some of the negativity that might have been in there from the day or from whatever else, and focus on like, well, what am I good at? What can I bring? You know, and that was just a tremendous exercise. I don't even know how long that was, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but it was very fruitful. But I appreciate you sharing that. If you have a second, do you mind if I just share what I shared with you guys before we hit record today?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And then I want to get back to the question I posed to both of you is, why is that important that we do that? Right. And what are we missing out on if we're not doing stuff like that? Right. And in particular, our relationships, right? Marriages, you guys know the hearts of men, but when it comes to our marriage, what are we missing there? When it comes to our kids, what are we missing there? So I'll let you brew on that for a second, but I've been doing this practice and lately, and it's been extremely helpful. I told you guys, admittedly so, that I'm not the best quote unquote journaler, but in the morning, but I have really started doing this practice in the evenings when I depart from the office, because I have found that one of the hardest transitions men have is going from work mode to family mode, whether it's a good day or a bad day, right? But going from work dad to family dad, it's a tough one. So this one is literally fresh off of yesterday. Today is August 4th as we record. This is from August 3rd. Tonight, as I depart from the office and go be with my family, I choose to be filled with gratitude. I hear little voices from my kids, and they don't sound happy tonight. My little guys are tired from summer camp, and they're crabby. Their mood won't impact me. Instead, I will bring humor and laughter if possible. I'm going to bring my best self in hopes it's contagious. If it's not contagious, I won't be disappointed. I will just keep being happy and fun. I'm not caught up in expectation of the outcomes. I'm just going to focus on what I control, and that's me. I'm light, I'm love, and I'm dad. And here I am 12 hours later, and I told you guys the outcome of last night. We had one of the best nights we've had all week, and I took my kids to the park. I chased them around. We went for ice cream. We went to a Halloween store, you know, to go look at costumes that are coming out this year. And my kids were just, the whole day turned around. And my wife had some space, you know, to decompress because she didn't have to deal with the crabby kids either. And it was a great night for everybody included. So, but it's been a very powerful practice. But back to the question from you for you both is, why should we do that? And what are we missing out on if we don't?
Well, I think that you're missing out of being like proud of yourself, proud of who you are, because if you don't take these times in, you can't like flip all the questions or the thoughts you have in your head. So if you are in a mood where you beat yourself up and it's been a tough day at work and everything feels like a bit heavy, these 2-3 minutes can totally change your mood and your the rest of the day. So you have to flip, so your thoughts can be, what can I do today to be proud of the man I am, or what would I do to that could make me proud of myself, be a proud dad, and think those thoughts instead, because then ideas begins to come up. Everybody knows what they love to do with their kids, but if you only think about the tough day or how work was troubling you today, you're missing out of great time with your kids and your family and your spouse.
100%. I love that. Trina, how about you?
I think that we miss out on true connection with the people that we love. Because if we don't like ourselves, if we don't like how we feel about ourselves, nobody else are gonna like us either. We're gonna be a different version of ourselves. I actually found myself in my previous marriage. I was that typical snappy, complaining, irritated wife that was just always unhappy. And I didn't know why. I thought it was my husband. I thought it was my kids. And at the end of the day, I recognized that what I'm choosing to do and where my focus is not what makes me fulfilled. It's not making me happy. So I really started tuning in to my needs. I started doing more mindfulness and checking in with myself and recognizing that there are a lot of needs that are not met for myself. I'm responsible for changing that tone inside. And when I started doing that, I became a lot more happy, a lot more fulfilled, and my life started changing. People around me started changing, but really at the end, it was me. So I have a lot more meaningful relationships in the way that I just choose to tune in, to be aware of what's happening inside of myself, and then choosing that intention, as Loise is talking about and you're talking about, of what do I choose to focus on?
Such a good answer. You're bringing up a really interesting question because it's a situation that I hear about probably once a week at this point. You know, I'll get a message from either one of our guys in our mastermind community, somebody outside the community. They'll pose a question and it always looks something like this. And to be quite honest, I don't know exactly what to tell the guy except for what we've seen in previous experiences. But I'll get an email like this. Hey, Larry, I'm not exactly sure what to do. My wife says I just don't make her happy anymore. And what you just said is, I think, a perfect example of I think we all know to some degree, no one can make somebody happy, right? We have no control over that. But yet somewhere along the line, I don't know if it's like too many Ryan Gosling movies, you know, or whatever else. It's like, oh, this other person is going to make me happy. Right. But I think that that's a really big miss. But I think as men, right, like how do we communicate back to our wives in the most loving way possible? Well, you shouldn't look to me to make you happy. That's got to come from you first, right? But in a heat of like that and a marriage that might feel really disconnected, that's an insanely tough conversation, right? And what is a man to do if his wife comes to him and says, you just don't make me happy anymore?
Well, I will start to ask questions. In which areas you don't feel happy, or what are your needs that you don't think is met? So she begins to become aware of not putting all the responsibility to her husband, but become aware herself of what are my needs, what is it that I'm missing, what is it that I'm not happy about.
So become really curious.
Become curious.
Let me ask you this from a psychological standpoint. How do we ask questions like that? I mean, I used to butcher this. I was terrible at it, right? I've gotten so much better at it to where, you know, how I've been trained in coaching and how I go to conversations with my wife, my voice tone, my body language, everything that I do when I become two things, which is appreciative and curious, right? Instead of leading with expectation and agenda. But for a guy who doesn't really know that, you know, what are some ways that we can have a very fruitful conversation with our wives and be very curious, but not come across as like intrusive and condescending or like, well, why do you feel that way? That's not right. You know what I mean? So how do you make that conversation actually intimate?
Well, to begin with, take a time in so you don't just react. And then set the intention of, well, I really want to be present. I want to hear what her thoughts and her feelings are, and before you begin to ask questions, just say that I mean this in the best possible way, because I want this to that we figure this out together. So I have some questions. Is it okay that I ask you them?
So prefacing, you know,
Yeah.
these questions with
Yeah.
the, like, hey, I'm asking you these things because every part of me cares.
Exactly.
Like,
I love you
okay.
and I want to figure this out.
Yeah. Okay. And then what type of questions do you think land the best for a woman from a man when you're asking?
Where is it that you don't think that I'm enough? Where is it that you don't think that your needs are met?
Okay.
In my experiences, and with a lot of my female clients, it's something to do with not helping at home. So, and a woman who does all the chores and organize the kids, has become a service person, and that is a lot of the stuff that is in her mind, I believe. So just like, be curious, ask questions.
And
You
I
need
wanna-
to become aware as well.
Okay. Trine, how about you? Thank you.
Yeah, I really want to add that something that we talk about in our Time In Tuesdays is using Q-tip. So quit taking it personally. And I think if men particularly, but for females too, we want to go through the filter of understanding that what's coming at us, we feel like it's coming at us, right? It's not coming to us, it's kind of coming at us, is we got to use Q-tip first. Quit taking it personally. The concerns that she's having is about what's happening inside of her. Even though she's saying it's about you, at the end of the day, it's what's happening inside of her. So if we can separate that, we'll make a huge impact and a huge difference in how we're going to show up with our spouse. So if we remember Q-tip first, and then the curiosity, as Louisa talks about, what do you think about that? What's happening with you? What do you mean by that? Curiosity, what, when, where, who, not necessarily why, because people tend to go more on defense when we use the question why, which is something that, you know, men probably like to use a lot because they kind of want to solve the problem. They want to kind of get out of this situation because it's very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. So if we remember that even if your wife is not happy with you and you are in the sentence, this is a wife problem that you guys can solve together, that you can be supporting her in figuring out what is it that she really needs to feel more fulfilled.
So even though it might feel like it's an attack on us, like, I don't know if I love you anymore, or I don't know if you make me happy anymore, instead of men saying, well, it's about me, it's more like this curious collaborative approach, right?
Yes.
And I also love the fact that you included the 3-letter word that starts with W, because one of the things that we train our guys on as it relates to conversational excellence with their wives or kids is we say, replace the 3-letter word the 3-letter word that starts with W with 3 words. Instead of using the word why, tell me more. So like with our kids or with my wife, I'm like, oh man, tell me about that. Or tell me more. Or, oh man, tell me about that. What's up? You know, so that way it becomes, we always describe why as, and I would love to know the psychological impact on this, because I know the word why is more like accusatory and it puts people on the defense. I don't really understand why, but if it goes back to like childhood, but tell me more, the way we train our guys is like, it's more like this open invitation, like, come into the circle, man. Tell me what's going on, right? It's this beautiful invite for more information versus why. It's just a way of reframing it. But why do people get on the defense? Even if we say it with a very curious tone, it's like, well, why do you feel that way? And some people are like, I don't know, I just do. right? Like that's how they'll respond automatically with that why word. But I'm curious about that.
Yes. Well, it's questioning someone's intention, right? So why did you do that is not just, well, I did it because. It's more about, well, I have already assumed that you did it out of this intention. Why did you use that intention? So there's a lot of interpretation of why a certain person did something, instead of it just being kind of a surface question of really curious of knowing why. So people are more prone to be defensive when they hear the why. And as you're saying, it goes back to childhood. There's association with the way that our parents kind of use the why, because it's usually when we had done something wrong. So there's also that association with the why did you do that, or that becomes a negative thing.
That makes total sense. Tell me about these Tune In Tuesdays. What is that?
So our Time In Tuesdays are
I'm sorry, Time In Tuesday, yeah.
where we tune into ourselves, yes.
Right.
So our Time In Tuesdays are weekly 45-minute live online meeting that we get together to practice these tune-ins. So we'll have a topic every week that really go along with what we talked about today. This was almost like a Time In Tuesday that we have with you today here, Larry. Understanding a little more about why we're doing certain things, what happens inside of ourselves, get this language more clarified. And then participants get to bring in their scenarios and situations and get that answered and questioned, or answers to their questions in terms of how to deal with maybe certain scenarios and certain circumstances, just like you posed today.
Very cool. And tell me how you help your clients and just people in general who work with you guys beyond the Time In Tuesdays.
Well, I have different programs at my end, and I love the subject of self-image, because if we don't love ourselves and like ourselves, we tend to be misunderstood, not loved, and come into conflicts and all that. So have a strong self-image is one of my programs.
Very good. And that's really important. You've got to bring your best self to these relationships.
Exactly. And there are exercises, there are some like small homeworks, there are handouts, so you have something concrete to take action on.
Where do people find that?
On our website. Trine and I has a website. It's called the heartconnection.co.
Got it. Okay.
And I think the biggest takeaway from our Time In Tuesdays is Loise and I were very alone on our journey of self-awareness. And I think a lot of men find themselves like, well, this is not something that we talk about. This is not something that's common, or this is not something I share with my friends. And this is a forum where you can come in and people get you, and people understand that this can be talked about, and this is okay to talk about. But particularly, as we talked about before, this recognition of progress, that a lot of times we don't notice that we've changed. We don't notice that we're doing better. And to have a place where you can recognize that you're making progress, and you can feel good about yourself, I think that is the biggest gift that we can give to ourselves, because we don't get that reflection everywhere else. We may come home and we get criticized for how we showed up, or if we're in a grumpy mood, and the appreciations may be lacking in our everyday life. But this is a place where we recognize our growth, and we recognize and we celebrate the little changes that we do. And then we can bring that back home, and we can have even better connections and better experiences at work.
I mean, that's what we truly want, right?
Yes,
that's what we truly want.
Yeah.
I honestly think we've been saying this for a long time, but if a man has connected, amazing, legendary relationships under his own roof, that perpetuates, and it's like this domino effect into the rest of his life, like his work life, his fitness, finances, like everything just seems to really take hold and take shape when those things are happening, but also quite the opposite. When you don't have those connections, when you don't have the relationships that you truly want under your own roof, that is also a domino effect. You know, I had a great mentor of mine say, you know, show me a guy that's physically fit, pretty good with his finances, and somewhat fulfilled in his career. He probably has a marriage that's pretty on point, you know, and rightfully so the other way, right? Show me the opposite of that, and you might see the opposite under his own roof. So this has been absolutely amazing. I want to make sure that if men want to connect with you, they want to go to the heartconnection.co, correct?
Yes.
Awesome. And then from there, how do they find the Time In Tuesdays? Is that a social media platform, or is that just right there on your site?
That's right there on our website. There's a tab that says Time In Tuesdays. They can sign up for that. You get the first month for only $5. And it's a subscription that you can sign up for every month.
Awesome. That's
And if
very
anyone
affordable.
wants to book direct sessions with Loise and I, you'll also find that through our website. If people are looking more for a private connection in that sense.
Awesome. Well, Loise and Trine, I want to give you guys just one more opportunity here. If you were to give us any other advice that we might have missed before we head out, Loise, I'll go to you first. What would that be?
When you know better, you do better.
When you know better, you do better. Yes, awareness. Trine?
Yeah, have that patience and kindness with yourself. Don't beat up yourself. Know that you're exactly where you're supposed to be on your journey of finding a little bit of fulfillment and happiness in your life. So give yourself that credit every single day that you're exactly where you're supposed to be.
Very good. Thank you so much for coming on today, both of you. This was amazing.
Well,
Thank you for having us, Larry.